Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 51st edition of the Wellness Policy. It is a new era. It is a new dawn. It is just a new beginning in the history of this great podcast. Maybe I think this will be the best one we've ever done.
It will certainly be the 51st.
Yeah. How are you guys doing?
Go on, Neil.
I'm doing really well because summer has arrived in Northern Ireland after 2 weeks of almost continuous rain. Absolutely glorious day. So,
what a day to sit inside on a couch talking on a microphone.
I'm not long back from a little stroll.
Ooh.
Not much more than a little stroll, but it was very pleasant.
What's a little stroll to you?
15 minutes.
Okay. Yeah. I guess that is relatively little.
Yeah.
Were you listening to anything in your ears?
No. I was listening to the birds in the trees, Jordan. Communing with nature.
Wow.
Okay.
Wait, you have birds in Canada yet?
We do. Yeah. In fact, our baseball team is named after a bird.
Oh, that's true.
Just as yours is.
Yeah, we're division rivals, as they say in baseball.
We don't have a baseball team.
We're in the same division, really.
Yeah, the AL East.
Oh, okay. You speak as if I should know that.
Well, you wear a baseball cap, literally.
You know, I'm just a poser with most of my fashion, right?
Oh, that's it. What's this GL that you're wearing?
This is the Golden Lovers.
Come on.
Oh,
professional wrestling.
Yeah, I guess I probably should have known that.
Yeah. No. So we're named after, our baseball team's named after like a bird that's apparently a local bird, the blue jay.
You don't see these?
I've never seen one in my life.
Oh, I see Oriole birds on a daily basis here.
Oh, wow. Good for you.
Yeah.
I see, like, we should be called the Toronto Pigeons, if anything. Like, those are everywhere. But the Blue Jays, I've never seen one ever.
Have you seen a raven?
I think, yeah, I think so. Oh, you have a team named after that as well.
But that's more of an Edgar Allan Poe thing.
Oh, I see. I see.
Who lived and died and is buried here.
Oh, had no idea.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool.
Thank you. Yeah.
Our local North American sport is hockey, ice hockey as we call it.
Really?
And they're the Belfast Giants. No, I haven't seen any Giants. I don't think we have any of those.
Your local sport is ice hockey, really, in Northern Ireland?
Well, I mean, soccer is my local what you would sort of pin a North American label on is hockey.
Okay.
Ice hockey.
Sweet.
Because
what is Giants referred to?
Well, because the mythical giant called Finn McCool, who built in myth a place called the Giant's Causeway on the north of Ireland, which is this sort of hexagonal rock formation.
Interesting.
He also created the Isle of Man, which is this island between Ireland and England, by ripping up the middle of Northern Ireland, what is now Northern Ireland, to create. So there's a big loch there now, a big lake,
okay, that's nice.
Very wellness oriented.
Well,
so far.
So as many people know, we used to come in with topics for these shows. Now we just talk about Giants and baseball team names and things like that. I mean, do we have some sort of agenda for this month, or is it just more of a?
I have something to contribute.
Yeah,
and I'm curious. Ahead. Okay, so some may know, every once in a while, used to do this on a daily basis, I facilitate drum circle experiences. So I did one yesterday with a group of about 20 young adults who I guess would meet criteria more recently for some sort of mental health diagnosis with psychotic symptoms like hallucinations, delusions, stuff like that. Anyway, it went very well. I quite enjoyed it. However, leading up to it, I was feeling particularly anxious. And I'm wondering if you guys ever relate to my experience, and if so, if you throughout your lives have found ways to maybe not just mitigate the discomfort, but more so just, I guess, more effectively work with your own discomfort. And the main reason I think why I was feeling particularly anxious yesterday is because it wasn't a typical day. Like, I wasn't doing things that are familiar to me. There were a lot of unknowns going into my experience yesterday early afternoon. So it was a new location I'd never been to. It was a whole new group of people I never met. I hadn't even spoke to the person that hired me on the phone. This was all email. It's just a lot of unknowns. Also, I'm being paid to offer something of value, and I only have so much control in that type of work. So I was feeling a bit more on edge. I was just feeling more uncomfortable and anxious. Like, wait, when we did the episode with my friend Matt on anxiety, I got the vibe that you were like, yeah, I don't really resonate with that. But what I described, like, if you're going into an unfamiliar situation, professional, social, or otherwise, like, will you feel more discomfort in certain ways?
Oh, 100%. I really don't remember the context of that particular answer, but I mean, I can completely relate to feeling anxious in various situations, especially like unfamiliar social ones. And I think for me, it used to be a lot worse than maybe it is now. Now that, like, to be quite honest, being social is not as big of an aspect in my life. I also, I guess, like, talking to a microphone for like what, I don't know, 15 years probably helps as well. But I I definitely still feel that way. And maybe in your, in your situation, what can you do but just do it, right? Like, especially if it's a professional thing. What can you do?
Well, I could avoid it. I could have called and said, hey, I'm sorry, I don't feel well. I'm not going to come do the gig. That was a possibility.
I'm actually surprised to hear this coming from you, because you feel like the last person to feel maybe nervous about these sort of things.
I'll take that as a compliment.
Yeah.
I've been told, actually, one of you mentioned this on our call a couple days ago. And it's not the first I've heard someone think of me as, quote, fearless. And I think what I often say in response is, no, I'm full of fear. I often feel some sort of intimidation or overwhelm or anxiety or fear. It's just that I've often tried to do the thing that feels scary anyway, despite the fear. And I guess part of me bringing up this conversation today is, one, just to understand your guys' experiences, and in particular, over your lives, what you have found to be more helpful than not. So, for instance, if I were to have just allowed my own feelings of overwhelm to consume me, and to email the person that hired me and said, I am so sorry, I woke up feeling awful, I can't make it today. That would have been like the worst thing for me to do. I would have felt way worse for doing that. Just the outright avoidance, because it was uncomfortable. That would have invited a whole different set of uncomfortable feelings and thoughts about myself. But look, it's not like I was on the verge of a panic attack, and never once did I consider, like, this is too much, I'm going to avoid the thing. However, I will say that it feels more uncomfortable than I would certainly prefer. And I don't know if it's more uncomfortable than it feels necessary. It's a very common feeling for me. Many of these drum circle programs that I've done, and I've done well over 1,000 of them over the past 15 years, many of them, especially if it's like a first time working with a particular group, I will feel this sense of, I don't want to say dread, but it's an uncomfortable experience in my body. And it used to be way worse. I mean, when I first started doing this stuff, I would start feeling these feelings days before, and especially the night before, and it would be hard to sleep. Nothing like that anymore. Maybe if I was doing something a lot higher stakes, like a conference where they were paying me a lot of money and there were a lot of, let's say, influential people that I was facilitating, okay, then I'd feel the higher stakes there. Yesterday was, yeah.
So at what level does it become so uncomfortable that you deem it unhelpful? Because I think a certain level of discomfort would probably all agree is good to keep us focused.
Sure. I guess for me, I would, many people talk about the idea that anxiety and excitement are very similar physiologically. It's just the stress response kicking in. And for some, in my situation yesterday, they might start feeling the stress response kicking in, all the different physiological effects of it, including the world of thoughts and emotions and things like that, in addition to more physical, like you feel like you have to pee again, even though you just did. For some, it might be a heart rate increasing or sweaty palms, things like that. And someone's interpretation could be, uh-oh, something's wrong. There's something like I should be avoiding right now. Over my time, I've been able to much more understand that I'm about to do something novel. I'm about to do something that I'm deeming as important, and thus my body is kicking into a higher state of stress to ensure that I'll meet the moment, that I'll do a good job, etc., whatever that means. But to your question about at what point is it unhelpful, like yesterday, again, I don't want to be hyperbolic here. It wasn't awful necessarily, but it was undesirable. I was feeling things that were unpleasant, and I wish I wasn't. So there's things I do to try to mitigate those feelings. Like, for instance, I don't deny it or ignore it. I welcome it. I vocalized my feelings with my wife. And not because I was looking for advice from her or anything for her to problem solve. But I found that simply stating my experience is helpful. It's a bit less lonely and isolating, especially in an uncomfortable experience internally. In moments like that, I think yesterday I said, can I have a hug? That's often helpful. If I'm feeling uncomfortable, I'll sometimes ask my wife for a hug. And I find that more helpful than not. And I'll do
That's
things
awesome.
like, thanks.
I think that's awesome because like I've never done that in my life.
Really?
Like it's just like, I mean, I don't know if you know, but like at least like traditionally Asians just we're not very big huggers. It's just not a thing. We don't even hug like parents. Like it's at least like my parents never necessarily we didn't necessarily encourage it. And that's awful because I mean, I really do see the benefits, especially like, in raising a child. So like with my son, like, I mean, I just hug him like all the time, right? And I know, a lot of it is for him, but often it's for me. Like I
Mm,
want to hug him to make me feel better. You know what I mean? And so I completely understand.
mm. Um, do you think Pauline had a similar experience with hugging?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So when do you hug each other?
Oh, I guess when we're each in need, like if it's just like a thank you. Like I mean if we're in just sort of like a bonding moment where like I'm really appreciative of something she did, obviously like, like moments like that. Like our hugging relationship is I guess relatively standard or different at least from maybe our parents hugging, but we're not like over the top like SNL, the lovers type of
Right.
hugging
And
either.
and I certainly don't fall into the category of PDA at all.
Right.
However, you're saying that my request for a hug felt more novel to you,
It,
but to use your language, it felt
traditionally,
like
yeah.
to use your language, it felt like I was in a state of need. Now, again, not that I needed her support. I would have been fine without it. However, I was feeling uncomfortable. And in that moment, I recognized, like, hey, it's probably more helpful than not to like share with her, hey, I'm feeling a bit uncomfortable because this is a new experience for me. Could I have a hug? And it's nice. It's very nice, in fact. Does it make everything go away? Of course not. But for me, it's like, what are all the tools I've developed in my toolkit to help make my moment to moment experience a bit more stress free or comfortable?
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting, Jordan, because as you describe that experience, it sounds almost like, a kid would ask for a hug when he or she is feeling somewhat uncomfortable from a parent or something. So is there an inner child sort of link to all of this, or am I overreaching?
I think maybe both things can be true. Yeah, in a sense, it's I can see that dynamic playing out, but also as you're saying that, I'm thinking, and this again is just my own interpretation of the request and the behavior. To me, it feels like a really mature thing to request.
Yeah.
Because again, it's not like mommy save me type of energy necessarily. Like,
Sure.
I'm fucking fine. Like, I've done this many times before and it's always been fine, in fact. And these are things I remind myself that I know once I arrive, the feelings go away. And I'm grateful that that's just how things play out for me. It's usually just in the anticipation, the build up, the drive to the place. Once I walk through the door, all that melts and I lock in, and I very much trust myself in these experiences. So it's not like I necessarily needed her to like save me, like in a I'm a helpless child type of sense.
No,
but yet also, yeah, like in this moment, I'm feeling a bit vulnerable and I'm having some difficult experiences. And it's nice to feel well supported as an ideal mother would with the child.
Yeah. The only reason I ask is because the dynamic of asking for a hug to feel better is kind of strange to me as well. Not perhaps culturally in the way that Wai described, but I am a hugger. And if I see, like, I saw some friends last week for the first time in a long time, and we all, like, as someone arrives and we're greeting each other, it's sort of a natural thing to just embrace, briefly. But there's no permission being asked there. It's kind of just a dynamic between old friends who are seeing each other for the first time in a while. So the reason I ask is that request for a hug. That feels unusual to me. But then I don't have a significant other to do that with, I guess. So.
And there's times maybe I'm talking and she'll ask if I want one. And there's other people that come to mind in my life who have done that too, in particularly like really difficult moments of sadness, overwhelm for me. But I guess for me to ask it, it's something between her and I that has become over the years normalized between the two of us. It's part of our like culture, I could say. And it feels a lot more simple to just like be super direct and instead of maybe like being a bit more covert or indirect, hoping that she'll offer something specific.
Yeah. So maybe it okay. So any sort of like, especially as a man, any sort of request indicating vulnerability is something that I guess is maybe is still unusual. But again, Jordan, like you've kind of addressed this, but like you, I think, are so secure in yourself in your masculinity that I don't think you consider requesting a hug to be any sort of threat towards that or any sort of like unusual thing. And that's, I think, a type of like thing you've built up over your entire life where like doing sort of uncomfortable things is just sort of your thing, or at least doing things that other people might deem uncomfortable is sort of your thing.
Yes, I think that's true. I was even at a concert over the weekend and with a friend, and she was talking about how uncomfortable she can get when we're like sitting in seats and she's not sure if someone else has already claimed those seats. And so she was really hesitant to actually sit there, even though it was a far superior seat than what she was in. And I was like, from my perspective, it's what's the big deal? Like, just sit there. And if it is someone's seat, they'll come back and let you know, and then you'll get up. And it can be that simple. But I have empathy for the fact that for her, it may not be so simple. And so there's things, it's all relative. There's things for me that others would be terrified to do. And for me, it's not necessarily that big of a deal. And the opposite is true too. There are things that would be really intimidating to me, and maybe for others, not so much. I also think to the masculinity piece of it, I'm very grateful for some of the ways in which my parents normalized aspects of masculinity. It was very normalized as like at a young age for my brother and I to like paint our nails if we wanted to, or to wear clothes that to others may have felt like not as masculine, whatever that means. I don't know, like, and grow up wearing a fucking John Deere hat or something like that.
What? Wait,
you know,
what was that was the article of clothing?
No, I'm just saying that when I think of masculinity in dress, that's the first thing that came to mind, like a tractor.
John Deere
brand.
hat is the most masculine article of clothing you could think of.
That's the first masculine article of clothing that came to mind.
I think it's one of the gayest things.
I don't know. Well, you tell Neal, me. Please, Neal.
Do you know what? I'm really not the best person to ask. Like at a Pride parade, I feel like an alien sometimes. I think I mentioned this last week, and I know it's Pride Month. Although in Belfast, we don't have our big march until August, because that's traditionally when the weather is most likely to be good. We often have a poor June. So yeah, I don't know.
Okay, well, how about just like
perhaps this penguin track top?
I would wear that. Yeah. But how about like, I don't know, like the request for a hug, or like any sort of like maybe indicator of like needing something to help soothe your feelings. Like, have you ever felt that sort of like I don't know if you want to call it a hesitation to request something like that in the past? Neal?
You're asking who?
Neal.
I don't think so. Certainly not from my parents. You know, I can certainly remember as a kid, asking for a hug, or even as far back as wanting to sort of be in the bed with my parents. Now, to be clear, I'm talking about when I'm about 4 or 5, not 16. But
we can normalize that. Why can't we normalize?
I got 16. That's funny. I had a memory, I think on Father's Day for obvious reasons. And I was thinking about, so my mom now lives with a boyfriend, and that has changed the dynamic of how it might feel for me to be in her home versus when my dad was alive and she lived in a home with him. It felt like when I was in their home, I felt more comfortable, as if like it was partly my home too, because it was my parents versus the boyfriend. The boyfriend's lovely, wonderful man. It's just, he's not my dad. I've only known him for so long. So it's very different. But I was thinking about the last time I was like literally in bed with my parents. And it was only a few years ago, maybe like 4 or so years ago. And we were watching Curb Your Enthusiasm together. So I just got in their bed and watched it with them. And I was thinking, like, do other like 35-year-old men do that? Or would some feel like, oh, this is really like physically awkward right now.
I think I would feel that way.
I would feel that way.
Really?
I would.
Yeah, there's no way 35-year-old me would have got into bed to watch TV with my.
And it's not like, you know, I was like snuggling or like napping. It was just, that's where they were watching the show. I wanted to watch the show too. So I just hopped in the, like, for me, it felt very normal.
Are we talking
And-
under the covers? Yeah.
I don't remember.
Okay.
I don't remember.
I mean, and even saying that, I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. I'm just telling you what my natural reaction would be. I wish I had maybe that sort of feeling of permission to do something like that. But I mean, it's hard for me to picture because one, my mom does not have a TV in her bed, and yeah, they don't watch Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Did you visit your dad on Sunday, Wai?
Unfortunately not. And that it was difficult for me because my partner, my wife's family had a family barbecue the same day.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really trying hard, like earlier in the week, to try to organize something so that we could meet everybody at once, or at least like on the same day, or at the very least on the same weekend. But it just didn't work out. And timing and scheduling with like the baby and the toddler is so incredibly difficult these days that it became like a bit of a sort of a stressful thing. It just to maybe even try to organize it, and having those issues, like planning around the baby's feeding schedule and all that, and ultimately deciding I can't do it. So I felt bad. So we're gonna do it next weekend instead. Yeah. How about you, Neil?
No, mine's out of town, so it was really a exchange of about 4.
You were in
texts.
Poison Rana on Father's Day instead.
That's right. Yeah,
Yes,
filling
good
in
job.
for Braden, who was spending the day with his dad, and of course, Davey was separated from his as well. So yes, we were.
Yeah. But I had a really nice Father's Day myself. Like my
You got the coolest hat, I have to say.
I did, yeah.
Didn't really explain that fully. I mean, although it was obvious.
Yeah, at daycare they just they had all the kids like paint on these white hats that said dad. I wore it on the Friday show. Loved it. Yeah. Anyway. No, it was I mean it's a nice feeling type of event, holiday for gift giving and stuff. Do you care at all to speak about maybe your Father's Day, Jordan? Like your experience with this past one?
Yeah, so my dad had died a couple years ago in March. So, and his birthday was a few weeks prior to that. And so Father's Day was kind of the first, let's say, like holiday or things where typically things would be a bit more celebratory if all is well. Since he died, and going into it a couple years ago, I had like an open mind of like, I don't know what it's going to feel like. And actually it wasn't bad. It wasn't like, it didn't hit me as hard as I think it hits other people. What surprised me that first year was, I think, the holiday or the day of whatever, an annual event that it hit me the hardest was my birthday that October, like 6 months later. And that was actually very unexpected for me. And that for the first few hours of the day, it was like really difficult emotionally for me. And a lot of it was just, it would be nice for him to just call, as he would typically do if, we were in different states on my birthday, and even just like a 2-minute phone call. Like I was very desirous of that. I felt the absence of that on my birthday. This past Father's Day, I guess what's kind of complicated. So I woke up to a text from a friend who sent the text to both my brother and I. And this mutual friend, he lost his dad when he was much younger. And he said something to the effect of, like thinking about you guys today. And it was very lovely. And then someone else, who's kind of like an older cousin of ours, who lost her dad only a handful of months ago. And her dad was one of my dad's best friends. She also texted Justin and I kind of saying like, hey, thinking about you today. And my mom had called and she just acknowledged that, today might be difficult for me. And my mom is someone who lost her father when she was 11. And it was interesting in that as much as I appreciated those people just like reaching out and offering love and just acknowledging that it might be difficult, and I wouldn't want them to have not done it, but there was a part of me of like, I feel like I would have rather just like not been thinking about this today or right now, or to wake up to it. It's the first thing that I kind of am encountered with. And I haven't said that to any of these people, and I don't plan to say that. Like, I wouldn't say, hey, I wish you wouldn't have done that. Because if they didn't, or let's just say if my mom hadn't acknowledged it, there may have been a part of me thinking like, that's kind of odd that she didn't. And so I guess to answer more simply in how it was complicated. It doesn't, you turn on a TV or you open up a social media app or really any like website, like Father's Day, it like smacks you right in the face. It's kind of unavoidable. Not unlike Christmas or New Year's. And so obviously the father relationship is going to be more top of mind. And at least for me now, the absence of one is more top of mind. And that sucks. Did it ruin my day? Like, no, not at all. In fact, I had like an incredible Sunday by the end of it, but it did make things a bit more difficult, especially like earlier on. But I fucking miss him. It's sad.
Is there any opportunity to like reflect on just the relationship that you were able to have on a day like that?
Yeah, and I think that's part of my practice now of this ongoing evolution of how do I relate to him or the idea of him. And certainly, thinking about things I feel grateful for that he offered me, like, for instance, the fact that he did normalize this idea of expressing myself in ways that feel interesting or true to me, instead of trying to like fit in and not, in trying to avoid others being like judgmental or mean to me based on what I wear or something like that. Like that, because he was someone he was very much into fashion. He wore like bold patterns and colors, and he was someone who did not care to hide in the shadows of social situations. And I love him for that. I think that's one of like the lovelier things that he offered me, amongst many incredible, lovely things that he offered me. So yes, focusing on those things is certainly helpful. And in part, that is a way in which I can still feel some sort of connection to him. But even that's been an ongoing struggle for me of like, how do I maintain some sense of connection to him? That actually has been, beyond just mourning the loss, that has been my biggest struggle the past couple years.
It's seeming to like come up rather organically though. Like in all these sort of like conversations, you've often brought up just the influence of your dad. So like it's just in you, Like I don't even know if it's something you really have to actively work on. It's just it's a part of who you are.
Yeah, I think I was actually maybe a month ago, with the therapist that I work with weekly. This was something that I had mentioned maybe a year ago, because I rarely meet with this therapist in person. Usually it's virtual. And I had shared the idea of watching back my eulogy of my father at his funeral with her, because I hadn't watched. I think I watched it, or I know I watched it within like, days of it happening. But now it's been a couple years since I kind of watched it again. And for me, part of what was important about doing that is that at the time it felt like one of the things that I could do well to honor him. It was something that was really important and meaningful for me to do, to actually like speak about him at the funeral. So I watched it back with this therapist about a month ago, and it was the most emotional I had been in a year plus of working with this therapist. And in a surprising way, it made me feel closer to him. And I think what was the learning is that for the past couple years, I've been like really desirous of this sense of connection, of like his spirit is actively doing something to communicate with me or to connect with me. And there were a couple of instances in his death where that felt more likely than not, like things that appeared on my phone that seemed unrealistic to just be coincidence. It felt more likely that this was his doing, but that only really happened twice. And when that happened, especially hours after his passing, I was then much more open to, oh, maybe he'll continue to do this. And that just hasn't been the case, at least in the ways of which I've like interpreted my experiences. So all that to say, I think I've been like more hoping or seeking like events where it feels like he's doing something to connect with me. And I think in the therapy session a few weeks ago, I'm starting to realize perhaps that it's more of an inside game for me to do things with intentionality that might help me feel closer to him, if that makes sense.
I think there's some bravery in wanting to, particularly with someone, watch the eulogy video, Jordan. I feel if I were in that same spot, that would, first of all, anytime I've done something like that, it hasn't been available to me to rewatch because it's not been streamed or anything. So, but I remember it. I remember watching it and was very emotional. But I remember you also put in some humor there about Steve Belinky. Like he got a shout out pretty early in your eulogy, and but I feel my sense of my own being is that I probably wouldn't want to see it again. I probably wouldn't want to relive it. So I think there's a bravery in that. And did you feel any kind of healing or therapeutic sense after having done it?
Absolutely. And that was the intent. So,
yeah.
I said it was the most emotional I had been with this therapist. And by emotional for me, it wasn't like crying, but it was tearful, I would say. Like it was the first time I grabbed a tissue in the 50 plus sessions I've had with this woman. But some might think or assume or interpret that, oh, I was tearful and that's sad and uncomfortable and unpleasant, so maybe I regretted doing it. And no, in fact, the complete opposite. It was the expression of difficult emotion that did feel healing. And in fact, it's what helped me feel more connected to my father. And there were a couple moments in my speech where I think I just more effectively expressed what he meant to me. There were maybe like 3 or 4 moments of that where I felt, in just listening and watching back, I felt like the punch land, and I was being emotionally effective in just communicating like, this is what this man was to me and meant to me. And it was in those 3 or 4 moments of watching back where I became the most emotional. And in turn, those are the moments in which I felt his presence more. And that was the lesson for me, that perhaps the ways in which I've been hoping to feel connected to him and often feeling like disappointed that those things aren't occurring, then perhaps this opened me up to new potential. And part of it is just connecting with my emotionality about what this man meant to me.
Of course. I've got a related question for Wai, which is, you've described the parent-child dynamic before being, perhaps less touchy-feely in terms of hugs and
with
whatnot.
my parents. Yeah.
Yeah. But I never ever feel like you resent that or anything. And I'm intrigued by your experience embracing the identity of father yourself. Father's Day's just passed. You had a hat on that said dad, but I suppose it's only your third Father's Day, is it?
I think only my second, actually. You know what?
Sure.
Yeah, my second, because my kid is 2. Wait. Yeah, maybe it's my third. You might know better than me. Yeah.
Never mind. But I mean, it's still a fairly new experience.
Third, you're right. It's the third. Yeah.
And the first one was probably kind of, you probably don't even remember it, but it's that's a new string to the bow of your identity.
It's like having a new birthday. It's great. It's awesome.
Yeah, I just wonder a couple of things, like how much you've just embraced the identity of being a dad at this point, and second of all, does that deepen the connection or understanding with your own dad? Because I wonder, Jordan, whenever you become a father, that's going to be another source of connection to your dad.
Oh yeah.
I would imagine. I know I'm not a father, so
it will. Well, thank you for the thoughtful questions. First of all, what's the first one?
Your identity as a dad, like you're at this point, so you really have embraced, that.
Yeah.
That.
Now, like honestly, I don't know how anybody could do anything but fully embrace it, because I'm so consumed by it. It's everything in my life. Like, it's all I'm mostly focused on. And I hate to say it, but I'm a lot more focused on fatherhood than I am even with the job. And I feel bad about that sometimes, just because I wish I could put more time and more of my energy and my thought into like growing post wrestling. But the father thing is just so demanding, especially like, with the newborn right now, that I don't really have like the energy to just, equally put into both things. But I it's something I'm kind of thinking about and being involved in every second of my life. And so I can't help but be able to embrace it fully as like a new identity. Like, it's gotten in the way certainly of like any other identity I might have considered in the past, whether it be I don't know, as a podcaster, maybe as like I don't know, hobbyist musician. I would even say as a Lego like hobbyist. I don't even have time for that. It's just more doing that stuff and taking care of like children than anything. So I'd say I'm fully embraced it, and I think that's more so by necessity, but it's also by want, because I love it. Like,
I want to give you credit. Like, you're choosing to be engaging in these ways. You're speaking as if it's just obvious that you would. And I'm sure for you, it is obvious that you would, but not every parent and certainly not every father is interested, capable, or willing to be as active as you are in fatherhood.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I mean, again, yeah, like I think I'm privileged to have a job that like, mainly takes place in the evenings, which still allows me a lot of time. I get to work at home, so I get to be around, I get to do pickups and drop off at daycare. so I recognize how privileged I am, and I'm trying to just embrace that privilege because it's I also recognize like these particular years are going to be very fleeting, and so I mean it makes me feel focused. It makes me feel. I mean, I am so sleep deprived that like it's not funny. Like it's just it's probably making me a lot less focused in other ways, but in other ways it's just kind of like giving me like a really good sort of direction for a lot, and I'm grateful for it. So to answer your question, yes, I have embraced it. Secondly, your other question about whether or not like being a father has helped me understand my parents more, the answer is also 100%. Like I feel like I'm slowly really growing up. Like I thought my dad was like relatively like uncool. I'm sad to say. Like I think a lot of people might, with the exception of you, Jordan. You seem to have like a very healthy respect for your dad's coolness, but didn't really consider that for my dad. But I recognize that I'm slowly transforming into him, like day by day. I'm
How
starting
so?
so my dad growing up, like I just every day he had a routine of just like all I ever really saw him do was like wash the dishes, listening to the radio. That's just like the constant activity I just think of him doing. It's just always that loud like water and just the loud radio. He's usually in his underwear doing it. Like but and like I'm not in my underwear, but like my life is basically that, like I'm just like all day, or at least like a lot of times is just spent like doing the dishes, listening to the podcast, and that's just kind of my joy. And now I understand why he does it. Um, and just also, I think the general, you start, I think, understanding, um, maybe just the difficulty even in like raising young children. And I don't know how he managed to do it because he raised three kids. I have two older brothers that were much closer in age. Um, and so I just, really have a lot more appreciation for everything they've gone through, every little step, whether it be changing a diaper or just, carrying strollers, I don't know, like just even maintaining just the sanity around the house while a partner might be spending a lot more time in with the children. Then that's not even getting to like teaching a child like lessons. Disciplining a child is an incredibly like challenging thing that I'm still trying to figure out. And just managing your own life on top of managing the life of somebody else. It's given me a lot more appreciation just for parents in general, but I think especially for my own parents, just because I feel like I was a real piece of shit to them, especially when I was like a teenager. So I do feel bad about a lot of that, and I think our communication is like it's not bad, but it's not great because like we have a bit of a language barrier. I speak Cantonese, but it's not at a high enough level that I could communicate like this with them. So like it's not to that level of depth, but like whenever possible, like it is nice to try to bond with them over something like that.
I think that's awesome. Can I say something though about the coolness of your dad, Way? I recall you posting on Instagram a picture. I don't think you identified him as your father, but I thought this can't be anyone else because it just looks like Way.
Yeah.
And he's wearing like Levi's and a shirt and on a motorbike.
Yes.
And he looks like the coolest guy. And I remember thinking, put a pair of specs on that guy and a cap, and you've got Way, So I was thinking I remember seeing it and thinking to myself, well, that kind of swag that was king that was described of you on a previous episode. I could sort of see where that came from.
Honestly, I mean, in hindsight, he's probably way cooler than I ever was at like a similar age.
There it is. He's got the glasses.
I was never
Hell yeah.
I was never brave enough to ride a motorcycle or like, flee a country to like, go to a different one, right? Like multiple times in his life.
Yeah.
So again, we're probably, at least I personally speaking, being a rebellious teenager, probably like in some ways a bit of a natural way of maybe how we all just grow up, but it's not really until you get a bit older that you might have a bit more of an appreciation for what your parents went through.
I was a very rebellious young person, but it was never toward my parents. But they also in return never really gave me much of anything to rebel against. Thankfully, because I've seen what it's like for friends at that age where their parents offered like too tight of a leash on them, that there was a lot of resentment and disdain and like acting out more so toward them, at least in spirit. I have a follow-up question. I will say though, based on your dishwashing note, Way, my father is maybe the only person I've ever known that never wore underwear of any kind. So much so that like when he was starting to like be hospitalized in as he was like sick and dying, my mom was like, fuck, we need to get you some like boxers or something to go into the hospital. Like he did not wear underwear. He also never wore deodorant. Like I've never seen him like own a stick of deodorant like that or underwear. He was an odd creature.
Interesting. That is fascinating. Did you ever ask him about that choice?
No, I guess not. And it just seemed so normal because that's all I ever knew. Like I, growing up, I never saw like, underwear or boxers or briefs or anything like that, just of my dad's in the family laundry or anything. He just fucking freeballed. And, and to me, it was normal because I didn't have much else to go off of, but I always wore underwear. So it's not like it was, that wasn't like I guess a thing for me that my parents or my mom kind of like normalized. It's just to me, it's like, yeah, you put something on under your pants or whatever. But for him, I don't know. I don't know if it was he was a very rebellious person.
You rebelled against the concept of underwear.
Perhaps. I don't know. I wouldn't want to do it. I think it would be uncomfortable.
Well, I don't know why I'm having this sort of reaction because, like, what's the harm in not wearing underwear? Why, why do we wear underwear? I guess.
I mean, like after you pee, you never get like the little dribble of piss after the fact.
So then you end up washing your underwear, or you would end up washing your pants, right? It's all
Right,
going
but I don't. I feel like I'd rather that get on like a $5 pair of briefs than like $100 pair of pants or something.
Oh well, did your dad buy $100 pants? I guess
He was probably spending like $400 on his pants.
$400 pants.
Yeah, he was very extra.
Maybe that's why he didn't want to wear underwear. He just wanted to feel every inch of the $100 pants.
It was probably nicer fabric than
maybe
you or I are accustomed to.
Maybe he had better urethra control than any of us.
That's possible too. And actually, as I think back, a lot of things are clicking now. I think he had incredible urethra control.
I like the safety net of underwear in the sense of just support and kind of that little layer between you.
But that's just, I think, how we've grown up. We've just been sort of like conditioned to feel comfortable with that, right? What if we?
Yeah, I think that's the consumerist big underwear making us feel we need to.
Yeah.
Without getting too biological, though, it also sort of collects your pieces and bits together in a way that I feel like depending on how slack you're, like if you're wearing khakis, or you don't want people to see the separate bits.
Maybe he did.
Never thought about that.
He did. I wouldn't put it past him.
Maybe he did. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, we got some people watching this. Some people listening to this. I want to go back to our some reaction to our conversation about hugs, which evidently received some feedback here. Jack Wannen says, hugs are awesome. That they are, Jack. Stefan, welcome, Stefan, says, the request is key. Sometimes you may want a hug, but the other person is not able to give one for whatever reason. Have you ever encountered that situation?
I think I may have over the weekend. Oh. So I met someone for the first time working at this concert venue, and I'm very friendly with a bunch of the people that work at this concert venue. And so a woman I'm very friendly with, she manages an area of the venue, and one of her staff members that evening was this young girl, super cool, super sweet. She had just turned 17, and my brother and our mutual friend were already talking to her. I come into the conversation. My brother's like, "Hey, this is this. Hey," and so I went to give her a hug, and after I did that, I was like, and she was like, she obliged, but I was like, I wonder if that may have been too much for her. Like the dynamic of like, I'm a grown man and she's a young girl, and I didn't she didn't like, I was the one just like, "Hey, nice to meet you," and I gave her a hug more so out of instinct than anything. And it did make me think after the fact. I didn't ask her, but I was like, did that possibly make her uncomfortable? Because obviously the last thing I would want, and the last intention I had, was to do that. The intention, if anything, was to be friendly and welcoming and inviting to her. So I don't know if I've outright been rejected by requesting a hug of someone, but that did come to mind because it was just a couple of days ago. I really sat for like a couple of minutes and reflected, like, should I maybe not have done that? I don't know.
I've had the experience of giving someone a hug and feeling that they're kind of uptight about it. They're not really, that's different from requesting a hug from someone else where you want them to kind of put their arms around you. So yeah, it's an interesting one. With my closer friends, it's an absolutely natural thing that we do. So it's something unsaid, it's something unspoken. There's a permission there.
Yeah.
I'm thinking way about you because I remember when the Sunday night after Forbidden Door 2023 in Toronto, I was more or less leaving the party after the wrestling event at Scotiabank and saying my goodbye, sort of going around sort of the people I were closest to and saying, "Look, well, this is it, I've got tomorrow, but that's really just packing, and then I'm off to Pearson to fly home." And I think I gave you a hug. In fact, I know I did. And I don't know whether, like, as someone who's not much of a hugger, whether you were okay with it or not. It's interesting. You probably don't even remember. But
I remember the goodbye. I don't remember the quality of hug. I remember I was get a scathing review for my hugging.
No, not at all. I just wondered how, like, as someone who's not a hugger, probably, I think you've said so.
I guess if I had to check
when someone sort of like just goes in there, without permission.
Oh my God, in that type of social context, absolutely not. Like I guess like if I were to like list, on a survey, check all the things you consider yourself. Like, what are your labels?
Yeah,
I would not label myself as a hugger. It's not necessarily like so I'm someone who's had to like really kind of work on my my gauge of like hugging sort of like acceptability, or hugging sort of like I guess it's just whether or not this person is a hugging greeter versus whether or not this person is a hugging greeter. For instance, okay, my wife she's not like big on social hugging at all. Like she doesn't really like it, or she just certainly never goes for it. Her brother is the total opposite. Her brother's like very like, "Yo, man, what's up?" Like, that sort of thing. So I kind of have to act very differently. Like if I'm, let's say, I hug my wife. I don't want to make it seem like that, but it's very different. Like despite the two of them having the same upbringing, with his brother, it's like I'm almost like I don't know if I should even like use this term because I know it might be used in other contexts, but like I almost have to code switch like into being a hugger, like with him versus with her, which is more a lot like, anyway.
See, my imagining way, I'm sorry I'm interrupting your flow, is like if you have the boys and the girls round to your patio, or John does, like a Braden is probably going to like turn up at the door and give you a big hug. I
Oh
would
yeah,
imagine
easy.
a Damien would probably be the
100%.
same.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, a
So
John maybe not so much.
no. So John is absolutely
Okay,
not. So like that is somebody that like I know. Okay, like I
hey
don't even.
man.
We certainly don't even shake hands. Like I mean, he and I are
No.
close enough that it's just like, hey, like what?
Have you ever said "I love you" to each other?
Fuck no. Are you kidding me?
Well, that's very
Absolutely not.
definitive.
Yeah, it's very. Yeah, I just can't imagine that happening right now.
But you do love him,
Of course, yes. Okay, of course, yes, yes. I guess, yeah. Even though
and he
that feels
obviously.
uncomfortable to say, I only say that it's uncomfortable to say because I know how uncomfortable it would be for him.
But
So
he
that
loves you too, I would assume. I
I
think it's
mean,
obvious.
define love, I suppose. You know, like I guess we do share like we kind of do share life together. Like I mean, in many ways, right? So yes, so I would say yes, but I it's uncomfortable almost even saying that because I feel like it would be uncomfortable for him to to express that. And it's the same way for me with hugging. Like I'll go for a hug with somebody who I know is very comfortable with
Yeah.
hugs, and I'll feel comfortable hugging. If somebody I know is very shy about hugs, then I probably wouldn't because I would feel uncomfortable with it. So I'm very much more of like a mirror on whether or not
Mhm.
I'm a touchy feely hugger or not.
But I think that's just good social sense. It's kind
Right.
of your antenna are correct. But I do think it's funny that, the two of you have traveled together and stayed together in various cities all over North America for wrestling shows and have shared on the streams from the Airbnb that you've got the absolute sense from the host that they think we're a couple, and,
Oh,
and
for
John
sure.
has
Yeah.
shared that, on some of
Yeah.
the streams. So like there's as long as some humor can be elemented into it all. I think the closeness is very, very obvious, but whether or not you want to say that you love one another or hug, that I suppose in that relationship it's just not necessary.
Right. But to answer your question about like, like hugging you or like hugging anybody else like in a social setting, no, that feels very natural for me to do. Right.
A few minutes ago, I mentioned I had a follow-up for you, Wei, so I don't want to let that go. And to
Sure.
kind of create a through line of this conversation around just a lot of this is just masculinity. Um,
Mhm.
with you have two sons now, so you are
Mhm.
the godlike male figure for now in their lives. Like, do
For now.
you ever for now? Um, do you consider um masculinity in the ways in which you model for them, engage with them, etc.?
Yeah. Again, another great question. Thank you. Now, my kids are very young right now. So like I wouldn't even necessarily say at least certainly not for the 2-month-old, who that I've even ventured. We're gonna have to maybe teach him how to lift his neck up before we
A very
teach him how to do
masculine
something.
behavior, by
Oh,
the way.
very much so. Yeah. But the other one, like even at age 3, I guess it helps that like so much of the learning material these days tends to be a lot more progressive, at least like where I live. So like there are books that, teach like I think we borrowed a book from the library recently that says something to the effect of like the title of the book is something like pink is for boys, blue is for girls.
Mm.
So like we don't really try to force any sort of like certainly not colors, as any sort of gender thing. Yeah, like I think, growing up and I think like knowing maybe what I know now, I think oftentimes the sort of like traditional concept of what masculinity is has probably done more harm than good. And those are things that I'd probably want to avoid. Um, are there things that about like being a male that I feel like he should um understand or at least like he should maybe recognize as differences? Yeah, I think there's that too. And I think it's just a learning experience for me because I have to kind of figure that out myself, but I'm open to at least uh just thinking about those concepts and also teaching him that like, well, certainly it's okay to cry, it's certainly okay to feel. Like these are all very, what I'm gathering are very sort of like modern ways of teaching young people that seem to be all around me. It's not just even something I think I have to like sort of venture off into my own. Yeah.
I think it's interesting in another sense, which is that the three of us are all very different people. We live in all three, three separate countries, different backgrounds, all of that. But one thing we have in common is siblings. Our siblings are all male. I've got two brothers, so have you, Wai.
Mm-hmm.
You've got Justin, Jordan. So in that sense, we've kind of all grown up in male-dominated households, I suppose. We were a toilet seats up house, which I think some visitors found very strange that the toilet seat was not just left down, because I guess my poor mom was kind of left as the only person who needed the seat down. But yeah, masculinity was all around me. I've got a different sexual orientation than both my brothers and my dad. But I think I've embraced some level of masculinity along the way. And it also goes back to what I was saying about pride parades and something and that sort of thing, is that I don't reject the more stereotypical way of being that you might see depicted on television of a gay man, but it doesn't feel natural to me, if you know what I mean. That
I wonder,
slightly campy kind of extra, if you like.
That's interesting. Like, I wonder if you had two sisters, if you would have been more feminine in your expression, let's say.
I wonder the same thing sometimes. Yeah. If I had sisters close in age to me, would I have maybe bonded with them over various things,
Because I feel like
stuff like that.
Like some ways in which I show up or express myself, I think are more feminine than you, Neal.
I wouldn't paint my nails, for example. I wouldn't think to do that.
But I wouldn't suck a dick.
No.
Okay.
Too much, Wai? Is that too much?
No, not too much. Not for you, at least.
Wai, I love you. I love you, Wai.
I guess I was gonna interject and say, whether or not you have a brother or sister, or whether or not you're growing up with like men or women predominantly in a house, I think within each of us is the capacity to be a bit more effeminate, a bit more masculine, traditionally, right? If we're using those terms, right? So, I mean, I don't know, maybe like in your household, it just there's just like in Jordan's, maybe there's just maybe more of a feeling of being free to do things that may be traditionally seen as effeminate. Maybe Neal, whether or not you grew up with sisters, might not have had any sort of effect on how you would have been. Maybe your sisters would have ended up being a bit more traditionally masculine. Kind of hard to say, right?
Yeah, impossible to say.
Yeah. I do want to get to some phone calls, everybody, before Jordan completely gets us banned over at youtube.com. And let's go to, again, everybody, I have the link right now in the live chat, so please call in. And Stefan, I know you were trying to call earlier. Please call back. Let's go up next to Steve. Steve grows weed. Oh, never mind. There we go. Stefan. Let's try Stefan.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
Hey, Stefan.
Hey, it's going
Thanks for calling.
Wanted to just bring up the hug thing again. It's weird. I have never described myself as a hugger. Other people have described me as a hugger. So it was kind of a strange thing. And it was something that I didn't realize until shortly after my wife and I had our daughter. There were periods of time where just after, the baby's gone to sleep or whatnot, I'd go to my wife and I'd try to go for a hug or something. And then she would stop and she said, listen, I've had the baby on me all day. I can't deal with physical contact right now. I love you, but no. And from that moment, we kind of developed a quick, just like, hey, are you in the space for a hug right now? And she'll do the same for me. And what's interesting is I kind of evolved that to every other aspect of hugs, where I wouldn't really have previously asked, would you be okay if I gave you a hug? Would you not? And I've noticed positive responses from people who then I wouldn't have expected that in the past. People who have said, you know what, no, please, not right now. Or others, you know what, yes, I'd really like a hug right now. So it's unique. I've never really gotten a bad experience from it.
Interesting. I like that one. She felt she had enough self-respect and felt comfortable enough with you to tell you, hey, like, I'm not preferring this right now. But it's also really lovely that she prefaced by saying, I love you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those things because I almost kind of viewed it as sort of like a sensory overstimulation, right? You know, sometimes you just get overstimulated, too much noise, too much input, right? So I just kind of viewed it as same thing. You know, touch is a kind of input, and if she was overloaded, that's it, right?
Completely understand. Yeah, I mean, and it hasn't really affected your sort of like desire to ask in the future, has it?
No, not at all. Because at least this way, it means she is more open with saying yes and no. I'm more open to ask. If anything, it's kind of brought our relationship to a deeper level, a more core level of communication.
I'm glad you recognize that and verbalize that, because I was going to. It seemed like even in the absence of a hug, more intimacy was created based on her honesty and your willingness to respect that.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that I wanted to bring up is Jordan, you were discussing your father and the passing of your father. My father ended up passing a few years ago, and I think this was the first Father's Day where it wasn't really a painful experience kind of thing. It was sort of a nice, you got to relax, think about him and the impacts that he had on our lives in a positive way without feeling that kind of, oh man, he's not here, that pain, that just kind of a cloud over your life. It is sort of a moving forward and taking stock of connecting with him in different ways now. So, you know, I think I mentioned before, my daughter has seemingly independently managed to fall in love with some of the same music that my dad liked when we were younger. And that has continued. She's even picked up some of the same musical instruments that my dad played when he was younger. And, you know, she's doing them now. She just finished a piano recital, and that was something my dad loved. So it's a way of seeing a connection that may not have been deliberate, but is something that I enjoy seeing in them. So it's you know, every day you move forward, and you know, you'll always remember that he's not here, but in a way, he always is.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, man.
No problem.
I'm curious if you're willing. What were the similar types of music or the artists that they both agreed on? And also, did your father wear underwear?
He did. He did. So my dad was very much, he loved all kind of music except hip hop and rap, which of course was the music that I fell in love with. So my daughter really started to fall in love with old school. We're talking, you know, Billy Joel, Elton John, and more than that, the Bollywood music of the 80s and 90s that my dad used to listen to, she has fallen in love with.
Wow.
And it's gotten to a great point where my dad and I did a radio show in Toronto for Bollywood music for 4 years. And now I get to go
You hosted with your dad?
I co-hosted with my dad, yeah.
That is so cool.
It was very interesting. And now she's getting to listen to some of the music that we did. You know, I'm pointing out, you know, this was the opening of our show, or this was the closing segments that we did, and she's enjoying it. And now I'm just trying to get the recordings to show it to her, stuff like that, right?
That's amazing. Awesome. What a fun little project. For you
Absolutely.
and your dad. I'm sure he loved it too.
Yes, absolutely. It was one of those things that we shared together, just the two of us. My mom and my brother were not as big into the music as we were. So when he would do the radio show, he asked me for help, and 4 years later,
Maybe you'll get to start one with your daughter at some point.
that would be amazing. All right,
Wow.
thank you very much, guys.
Thank you, bud.
Thank you, Stefan. That's awesome.
Take care.
That is awesome. Like, it's one thing to share the love of a particular genre of music with your father,
Mhm.
but to engage in a creative project or just creative work
Yeah.
like that, like producing something. Like,
Mhm.
I'm trying to think if I worked with my dad, but he was in the car business. So sometimes I would drive a car home from an auction instead of him paying a tow truck to do it. I'm trying to think of like if he and I ever collaborated
Yeah.
in some sort of way like that. And nothing's coming to mind that kind of rhymes with that. So that seems really remarkable. I'm glad he shared that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like a very special thing. Somebody could
Very.
share with a parent.
Because it makes me think of the sort of comedy meme almost of like male friendships being conducted over sharing a podcast. But here is like father and a son, doing something similar, even more sort of consequential, perhaps, as it's broadcast on the radio. Jordan shared because we were talking about this the other day, Jordan, and you shared with me an SNL skit where I think a father and son are bonding because the only reason they're bonding is because they've got a podcast together. So it's kind of it's almost become a meme. That you've got
It's the source
that's
of
how
my,
you have a
the
male
source of my
relationship.
social life, when it's sad to say. Yeah, no, it reminds me of so I follow there are a few instances of this I know in the city here where there are parents who are immigrants who started these like businesses, and they could be like a restaurant, for instance, or like I know somebody who's a jeweler whose parents were jewelers, and now their kids are at the age where they can take over or at least help with the business. And the way the kids help is by having great social media. So like it's
Mhm.
somewhat unusual in that like these businesses, like these restaurants on the surface, they're like the most traditional sort of like old school, like run by like old people type of like businesses. The storefronts are kind of old, but the social media is so modern and current, and that sort of like contrast between the two works so well. But more importantly, I'm so impressed and almost like kind of jealous, or at least like wish I had that sort of thing with my parents, where I could see them collaborate with their parents and using their differences make this family thing into a better, more modern, like project for the family that sustains the family.
That certainly does sound cool if it
Yeah.
works out well in that sense. I think another thing that tends to happen with family businesses is sometimes the child might feel a pressured expectation to contribute to a family business, to not maybe let the business die with the retirement of their parent. Um, and I know people that work for their parents or plan to or already have taken over. And in a sense, and it's something I even, as I was trying to navigate the transition between school and career, there was one day I went to a car dealership that my dad, he essentially was the capital and provided the cars to be sold on their lot. And I went for the day to be a quote salesman, even though I don't know shit about automobiles. And it felt like a nepotism placement because it was. And it was so crystal clear to me, like, what am I doing here? And again, like, making quick cash to just drive a car home at an auction, like that was great as just side money. But I certainly never felt pressure from my father to take over the equity he built in his business. And I'm grateful to him for that. Um, and perhaps for him in part was because I really never showed much of an interest in what his business was. I showed an interest in him and his relationship to his business, but not necessarily in what his business was, i.e. cars and the sale of them.
I'd love to know, like, I'd love to be like a fly in the wall with one of those interactions. Like, what would you do to sell a car? I guess.
Oh, I don't know. And so thinking back on it, this was like early 20s, and
Can we like role play, like, like Neil and I we're shopping for a family car, all right?
honestly, I never even had a conversation with any customer that
Oh, you
day.
didn't even get that far?
No. I showed up like dressed in like a collared shirt. Like I dressed in a way that did not feel natural to me. And I totally felt the resentment from the other salesmen. And these were like men, like they were much older than me, much bigger than me, even from memory. And I felt the resentment because, like, who is this punk kid who, well, they knew who he was. I'm the son of the guy who's like giving them stuff to sell. But, if I were to have to like try to step on their toes and to talk to a customer and get the sale, that's money out of their pocket, because my assumption is that they were working based off commission.
Mm-hmm.
And so I also have, it's funny, just these like flashes of life experience that just never leave you. I remember that night being at a gym, running around a track, and just thinking to myself, like, what the fuck? I gotta find a way to start like monetizing this music thing more regularly. And that I was on a path to figuring out, like, okay, how can I build a practice of, giving music lessons to people? And I figured that out eventually. But that was, a part where I was like, I need to start making some more money. My dad was just trying to be a good father, like, hey, well, here's an opportunity for you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried it for one day, and it was so crystal clear. Like, I think I was just trying to hide in the shadows until the day ended. And it was like a slap of cold water in the face of, like, you got to figure something better out for yourself.
Did you learn, though, Jordan, any kind of facets of entrepreneurship from your dad? Because, like, I mean, you've got a
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, even, and my mom was also entrepreneurial too. Once she had me and then Justin, she stopped working for the majority of our childhood. But once we started to become like teenagers, like young teens, she started her own photo business where she's, going to different events and taking Polaroid pictures and putting them in snow globes and frames and shit like that. And so, that was her own idea and her own business that she started from nothing, similar to what my dad had always done. So the two of them, like, the idea of a parent who is expected to dress in a certain way and to leave the house so they get to work at the hour that they're required, like all the requesting vacation time and having to document sick leave and stuff like that. None of that was normal to me. I had never seen that in a typical way. And it's no surprise that the only time I had anything close to that was working for a pro wrestling company. Everything else I've ever done has been more so entrepreneurial. Where, it's on me to figure out health insurance in this country, and it's on me to like pay my taxes and stuff like that. And it's on me to schedule like the work I do. And I give much of the credit to my parents, because both of them very much normalized that this is a thing you're allowed to do. And so part of my play as a 13-year-old was, having a real Pokemon card hustle in like 1999 and going to the flea market and renting a table and having a display case and getting boxes of packs shipped from Japan. So I'm both selling single cards and like imported packs of cards. And I didn't do it as a 13-year-old because I needed the money necessarily. I did it because it was fucking fun. Like that, like being an entrepreneur in that sense was part of how I played in the world. I wasn't as interested in video games, but I loved the Pokemon card hustle.
Did you make money doing it?
Yeah, like hundreds of dollars a week.
Wow.
Wow.
I hear they're coming back, or they are back.
Oh, it's fine art now.
It is.
Like people our age aren't, spending $100,000 on an Andy Warhol painting. They're spending it on like a first edition Blastoise.
Logan Paul wore one at
Yeah,
one of his first appearances, didn't he? Around his neck,
with-
and it was
with
worth
things
like
are like-
$500,000 or something. What,
Yeah, they're
mad.
graded, like they're authenticated, no different than fine art is, and they go to auction. It's just that some of these auctions are on Whatnot and not at some like traditional art house.
Yeah.
I respect that, especially at that age.
Oh, yeah.
Having the sort of really like the confidence to interact. I'm assuming like with people that were probably older than you.
Yes, well, certainly when you're like renting a table from a flea market, but I mean, I was already going to this flea market. So my one of my best friends and at the time my next door neighbor, his dad owned a pawn shop, so his parents are very entrepreneurial too. And so my friend and his older brother would already be going to this flea market on Sundays. Also, it was the home of Maryland Championship Wrestling. That's how we got into indie local wrestling too. And I would just go with them on Sunday mornings because it was fun to help sell their stuff. They would have like electronics, like Walkmans and shit like that. They'd have brand new DVDs. They'd also have power tools. And again, it was like it was easy cash for me to do it, and it was fun to like play shop on a Sunday morning.
Mhm.
And then we noticed all these kids trading and selling Pokemon cards, and we're like, wait a second, you just bought that one like card for $50? And they were like, yeah, it's a great deal. And then we got really interested in, there's a market for it. So most of the people we were selling the cards to were about our age. But when I'm getting boxes of packs imported from Japan, I'm not doing business with another 13-year-old to make that happen.
Wow.
It was exciting.
Yeah. Like all I ever hear about that sort of thing, like I think that this extended to like trading cards and pogs at the time, where like this sort of thing was frowned upon because it, like at least in school, because it would teach kids how to gamble. But it also probably taught them great sort of like financial negotiation skills, right?
Mhm.
Like it probably taught them something about commerce that they might have like retained in ways that other, I don't know, classes probably weren't able to teach.
I was the StubHub of my high school. Like I was the ticket scalper of my high school. And I don't think I've shared this with you guys before. But I was someone that was more into live music than most other people, including the teachers. And this was like, AOL and kind of starting to get into post dial-up internet. So Ticketmaster.com necessarily wasn't like the place most people got their tickets at that point. And social media wasn't a thing. So it was like the newspaper or the radio where most people were learning that a concert was announced and the ticket on sale is that Saturday. And I knew these things and I was buying these tickets for myself. And like, okay, well, if I know, I had a good feel. If I knew a show, this Incubus show, that was one I probably made the most money on. If I knew that it was going to sell out based on their popularity and the venue choice, and I'm going to buy 2 for my brother and I, and it's an 8-ticket limit, well, why wouldn't I buy 8 tickets and sell 6 of them, even if I just make enough profit to cover my ticket and my brother's ticket? To me, that's the win. And
now, what if you didn't though? What if you ended up losing money?
I did on one show. a Blink 182 Green Day show. And but again, like that's the cost of doing business. And as long as you make more than you lose, then like you're profitable. And I mean, I was selling tickets to teachers.
Yeah. A pioneer in dynamic pricing, Jordan.
And even like negotiating with teachers of like 4 grades. And I realized this is like
excuse
very
me.
improper for the teacher to be doing. But
Right.
the high school I went to, there was a lot of education that I experienced and benefited from, I'd argue, that went beyond what was in a textbook.
Okay, so you're like, I don't know, are you failing like, I don't know, calculus, and your teacher's like, you give me those Incubus tickets, 2 Incubus tickets, front row.
No. Well, that was a different negotiation. So, yes, there was one teacher who came up to me discreetly after a class and said, I think it was the Incubus show, and she was like, "Hey, my son's favorite band is Incubus, and I know they have a show coming up." And I was like, "Yeah, it's sold out." And I don't, from memory, I don't think she was outright saying like, "Hey, do you have any more I could buy?" But I probably just said I have a couple extra that I'm not going to use. And I was like, well, you're my teacher, and I'm going to like give you a buddy price. Still profited off it, but I think it bought me some goodwill with her. There was another, it was physics. Yes, it was physics, 11th grade. I am, I think, still just terrible at basic science. And I was getting not good grades on the exams within the first few months of this class. And the thing with science is that if you don't understand like the initial concepts, then you're kind of fucked, because everything builds upon the foundational topics in these sciences. And in some sort of physics lesson, the teacher asked for a volunteer. I raised my hand, and she had 2 tennis balls connected by this like really long, thick rubber band. And her and I kept like walking backwards to create more tension with the band. And she accidentally let go of the tennis ball, and it hit me in the crotch area. It didn't hit me in the dick, but like it came close to it. And this is where I started utilizing like my pro wrestling skill of selling. So I grabbed my dick and I dropped to the ground, and I was really selling like she fucked me up. And but I took it a step further in that I wanted it to seem real. So I was trying to make it look like I was actually okay, but demonstrating physically that I was in real pain. And she was like horrified that not only that happened, but like I was kind of assaulted by her in front of the class. And after the class, she came up to me super apologetic. And the negotiation between her and I was basically like, you give me a good grade and I don't say anything. And there were exams that I literally just drew pictures on and did not respond to any of the questions. And I got an A by the end of that semester. So I learned nothing about basic physics, but I learned how to engage with people to pass.
Blackmail. It would be
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was not in exchange for a concert ticket, but in exchange for...
It was a negotiation. I had leverage, and I recognized I had leverage, and she had something I desired, which was a good grade, because I was not interested in like spending a lot of energy to figure out physics that year.
Right. I don't know if that's a good lesson to teach here or not, but maybe
I don't know.
there was something to, you know, maybe there's something a strong moral coming out of that somewhere. Well, thank you. I mean, listen, it's all amounted to who you are today, and I would say you're a pretty good person today, Jordan. All right.
I think what my parents offered me more generally was like, as long as you're not hurting or harming yourself or anyone else, like you don't always have to follow norms or conventions. Like there's wiggle room. There's room to negotiate. There's room to do things a different way. And again, it was like, just don't be intentionally like, like cruel or mean-spirited or harmful to yourself or anyone else.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that entirely. Yes.
And I love him for it.
All right. Last thing here before we get out of here, let's talk to Steve Grosweed. Hey, Steve.
How we doing, guys?
Oh no, you're driving again.
Yeah, I'm always driving. That's what I do for a living.
Oh, that is true.
Okay.
All right, well, safety first, Steve.
Yeah. Just say what do you have to quickly say? You could quickly say it, and we'll hang up, and that's it.
Well, just saying, like talking about all the father stuff and stuff. Like it's like I feel for you, like not having a father in your life and feeling that, like, because that's something that I think about a lot. My dad is almost he's 74 now. And his health is decent, but I'm aware that one day it's not going to be, and he's not going to be with us. And I really make an extra effort right now because of his age to make a point of having those certain moments with him, because I know they're not going to be, like, they're going to be gone soon. So it's okay. So I'm pulled over now. I have a picture of my grandson. We were doing like a little Christmas get together for the family, and we were in a hall. And my grandson, who was, I think, 4 or 5 at the time, is just sitting there with my father across the table from each other, having a bag of, like, just eating a bag of chips. They each got a bag of chips, and they're looking at each other, and they're just having this little conversation. And I took a picture of that, and it's on my screensaver on my TV. I'm getting emotional just talking about it because it's such a simple moment, but it's so powerful. And I don't know if my grandson will even really have that strong a memory of him when he gets older, but just having that photo means so much to me,
Yeah.
So it's like stuff like that, it's like I don't take for granted. So it's like, yeah, you do really have to cherish those moments.
Steve, I think having great grandparents who are alive is in itself like very unusual. I mean,
yes.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, I don't know mine. I've never met mine, so.
Well, like it's such so many things have to go right in order for that scenario to happen. That scenario of your grandchild having a bag of chips with your dad at the table. So many things have to have gone right to even just like have somebody have kids, much less like have, I guess a kids that are, I guess, in maybe good enough sort of like your family relationship are good enough that you can have that sort of scenario. They're both just alive, and they both happen to have just that environment. Anyway, I completely relate because I cherish a lot of those moments that my dad might be playing with my children as well. Thank you, Steve. Thank you for sharing, and safe driving.
It still blows my mind you're a grandfather.
It is crazy. It blows my mind once in a while, too. I might be taking my grandson out for his first camping trip this weekend, but I'm not sure if the weather's going to cooperate, so we'll see. But he's pumped to catch a fish and do all that kind of stuff, so that's,
Awesome.
It's,
Amazing.
I was a very young father, so I ended up being a young grandfather, and it's not my son's fault because he had his kid at like 23, which I think is a fairly respectable age, where I had him at 18, right? So it's like not so respectable. But
23 and 18 is not that big of a difference.
No, but I mean, you're right. But it's like, I think when you say it to somebody, it sounds a lot different, and it's like, I was barely out of high school. He was at least able to finish school and kind of get himself to a certain point, like, where it's like, yeah, but it's cool on this end of things. That's the thing. It's like, as much as it might have been a stupid mistake at the time, it's like, here I am. I'm not even 50 years old. I've got a grandson who's like 6 years old, and I'm still able-bodied enough that I can do cool stuff with him. He's like, him and me's relationship is so strong. Being a grandfather is almost cooler than being a dad. Like I'm not sure because you don't have to deal with any of the teaching. Like you do, but like I don't like you were talking about the struggle with discipline way. It's like I don't really have to deal with that. I don't like. I mean, there's some times where I have to be like, "Hey, man," but like otherwise, it's like I don't really do that. I just kind of there's almost things that I wouldn't let my kids get away with that I'll let him get away with because yeah, why not? I'm Papa. You know, it's like
You're
you
just
get to
there
do
for
that
fun.
around me. You know what I mean? That's the thing. It's like the relationship is different, right? So
Amazing.
I can relate to that a little bit as an uncle, you know, because
yeah,
both my
very
brothers
similar.
have kids, and it's kind of like, yeah, Uncle Neil will allow us to do certain things that Mom and Dad won't, and it's true.
You enjoy that, Steve, and thank you very much for the call again.
All right, cheers, guys.
Thanks, man.
And thank you, everybody, for listening to this month's edition of The Wellness Policy. I said at the beginning that this would be the greatest episode we've ever done. I think I was right. All right. If it wasn't obvious enough. Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Neil. Anything you guys want to share, plug?
No.
The high rollers of the Post Wrestling Cafe, who are double and espresso members, join Mr. Pollock and myself on at this time. Well, the time this show started on Thursday for book club.
Yes, you'll be talking about the Jim Ross book, Under the Black Hat.
Under the Black Hat, his newest book, which takes him right up to signing with AEW, and it's. I got it at the time it was released, but it's been a bit of a revelation to sort of read it again in the context of post Janelle Grant lawsuit, and sort of also just revisiting some of the dynamics of his relationship with Vince. It's just incredible, So
Excellent.
An interesting book.
All right, so that is this weekend on Book Club. I believe John Pollock and Damian Abraham may be actively listening to this podcast right now.
Wow.
He tweeted this to me, so you can listen to him and Damian Abraham. Sorry I had to bail on our meeting. We'll maybe talk to you guys some other time. Take care. Bye-bye.